Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Papaleo. I'm a proud SUNY Cortland alum, class of 2014, and I hope you all are staying well during this really difficult time. If there's one thing that's really helped me not only express myself creatively, but also provide an outlet in which I can provide some positivity to others, it's through drawing. So today, for the very first time that I'm ever doing this, and what better time to do it than now with my fellow Red Dragons, is to give you a drawing tutorial. Now you're probably thinking, Christina, I can't draw. And I want to challenge you on that because I believe that anybody can draw. It's really a matter of perspective and how you choose to see the world, and then what you put and how you put that on paper. And if you think about it, drawing anything is a matter of drawing several shapes on paper and then creating something out of it. It doesn't have to look a certain way. And if anything, it challenges us to rethink the expectations that we've put on ourselves and that other people have put on us in order to create what we call art. So what am I going to teach you? Well, I couldn't think of anything except drawing Blaze, and specifically the Blaze statue that sits proudly outside of the stadium on campus. It's one of my favorite spots, and when I worked at Cortland, I always loved passing by it and showing friends and family when they would come to visit, because it really represents the community that Cortland is: resilient, strong, and really remarkable. So I've drawn Blaze a couple times, the statue, and I have put together something that I think would be simple enough to start off with. And if you want to continue on, specifically, I'm going to teach you how to draw the head of the Blaze statue, but you can certainly expand on it and do the body. The way I like to draw is really visually. So I've taken a few art classes when I was younger, but I never have drawn professionally. It's something that I just really enjoy, and that's what it should be. Drawing should be fun and engaging. So we're going to have some fun, and I hope you really enjoy this. And again, bear with me. This is my first time, so I'm hoping that I'm able to capture what I'm doing on paper to video, so that way you can follow along with me. Feel free to join in, bring in your family members, your kids. I tried to make this as friendly as possible for everybody. So here we go. So I'm just going to situate my camera right here. You can probably see this. So a few things that you'll need to start off with is a sketchbook. And you can see I've already started drawing Blaze here. I'm going to just show you the different phases that go along with how I've drawn the Blaze statue. I got some pencils. You don't have to have special drawing pencils to do this. You can use any type of pencil. I have some colored pencil, or a colored pencil rather, to specifically red, because SUNY Cortland, an eraser, and a pencil sharpener, and a shaving bowl, because I have one of those loose pencil sharpeners. So just a few basic supplies. If you don't have a sketchbook, any type of paper will do: construction paper, computer paper, whatever you have on hand. So like I mentioned before, drawing is like a series of shapes. Anything that we can see or feel is really a shape, and what we turn that shape into could become art. So for example, Blaze, so I'll show you what he will look like. So this is the end product, and again, yours does not have to look like mine. I hope you come out of this really embracing your own form of creativity, and it doesn't have to look realistic. Quite honestly, a lot of the times when I draw, I know it doesn't start off the way I wanted it to, but as I continue and get into that flow and that rhythm, I find myself really enjoying it. And you'd be amazed at, once you really get comfortable and just enjoying what you're creating, the outcome of it is something that you might not have expected. So that's going to be the end product. We'll get to that. But first, we'll start off with just a series of shapes. You know, if you can draw a circle or an oval or a square, you can draw Blaze. So what I'll do here is, so if you see on the screen there, I drew a series of shapes to start the head. So we got a rectangle, square, some ovals. So he's just going to be a series of squares and ovals. So to kind of show you what that looks like, I'm going to draw kind of like looks like a parallelogram. I was never good in geometry in high school or college, but if you're a mathematician or somebody who's good at math, this might interest you. So I'm going to draw Blaze's head. And I was also thinking about too how the sculptor, who's also a Cortland alum, Scott Oldfield, class of 2006, how he sculpted Blaze. And really, he probably started off with Blaze being a series of shapes and sheets of metal that eventually took a 3D form. So we're going to be doing Blaze in 2D. So what I'm doing here, and a lot of the times too, I tend to run off the paper, and that's quite all right. And again, it doesn't have to be proportioned. If anything, this is rough sketching, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a lot of erasing, because these shapes are not going to stay this way. But just to start off with, just to get the frame, because then what we'll do is, a lot of times drawing these series of shapes and then erasing them and taking things away. So we're adding things in and taking them away, again, with math. So I'm just doing a rough sketch right now, kind of using this as a guide, because again, just for the sake of time, I pre-did a few stages for you, so that way you can go back to this if you want to hit pause and kind of look what I did. And again, yours does not have to look like mine. A lot of times, you know, your drawing might take on a different shape, and that's the beauty of it. No one drawing is the same, and that's kind of the beauty of life, right? I'm channeling my inner Bob Ross right now. For those of you who know who Bob Ross is, I highly recommend him if you're into painting. So I'm drawing Blaze's mouth right now, and figuring out how far down the mouth can go. And if you have larger paper, that's great too. You can draw a larger version of Blaze, of the head. This is where the eye is going to go. And a lot of these lines we're going to remove, but just to have us take shape and also gauge how much of the paper we're using, because we want to make sure that we have a frame that we can work in with. So, all right. So that's good. And these are the scales too along his back. So right now it's just very rough sketching, lots of shapes and ovals. All right, so kind of similar to what I did there. Oh, I forgot to scale there. But again, you're just drawing series of shapes. So the next stage is taking that. You're going to be doing a lot of erasing to kind of make the head. So you're probably wondering, how am I going to get to that, Christina? Well, I'll show you by actually taking what I did here. So this is where all the erasing comes in. I'm just going to roll up my sleeves here. Drawing can get really messy sometimes, but again, that's the beauty of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start erasing inside the eye. For some reason, I always like to, draw the eyes first. There's just something about the expression of an eye that can really capture you. into any form of art. And I'm also adding a bridge to Blaze's nose here. Because if you notice, if you've ever been on campus and have seen the statue, I highly recommend it. You'll see there's a little bridge there that connects the eye to the mouth, the muzzle. So we're going to draw that. We also can't forget that there's actually a few layers inside the eye. So there's kind of like 3 ovals in one. And again, I'm still really, really rough sketching it here as we're taking away some of the shapes. So we're getting rid of that parallelogram. Now that once you're satisfied with the frame of it, you want to make sure that the eyelid, Blaze's eyelid, curves upward. So it's going to be a little bit higher than the rest of the head. Typical dragon eye. Now I'm going to take this oval here in the top part of the muzzle, right there. Making sure you can still see me. Sorry, I realize my hand's in the way. And creating a nose. So we're lifting part of that oval out and erasing a little bit more. We're kind of making this 3-dimensional too by adding a little bit lift to that muzzle. I hope I'm describing this correctly or in a way that is easy to understand. So then we're going to add some definition to his mouth. Again, with more erasing. We're going to take away some parts of the oval. So sometimes I like it to move around. I don't like to stay in one particular place. So I'm going to work on the horns. And those horns are going to be coming out. Again, just to give you all an idea, I've had to redo this drawing a couple times because I tend to not do that well with proportions. It could be my depth perception or lack thereof, but eventually I got it right. But sometimes, you know, it's going to go off the page, and that's quite all right too. It doesn't have to be perfect. Be perfectly imperfect. So I'm going to add some lines because I want to, and at least for this one, I wanted to make Blaze look like the metal statue. So showing the different plates of metal. So we're going to add a line here. And now we're going to get to his ear too. So his ear actually has a little bit of a dip on the top of it. So I'm going to curl that down right there. And then I'm going to curve right here. And I'm going to draw hard just so you can see it on the video. And I apologize for the poor video quality too. But typically I don't like to draw too hard because it's really difficult to erase. And if you're using drawing pencils like the one I have here, Faber-Castell is a really great brand, and you can get different levels of weights. So there's a letter system, and they're based on the different weights of the pencil. But if you also have just a traditional pencil, that's fine too. Because eventually we're actually, at least with this drawing that I did, I used an ink pen and colored pencil. So we're not even going to be using regular graphite pencil for much longer. But all right, let's keep drawing over here. So part of Blaze's scale, at least the top one near the ear, is kind of protruding out of the top. I'm drawing a little curve. You can see that the scale is a little bit larger than what I originally did, but that's okay. That's the beauty of art. It's different every time. And I drew a guiding line for myself because I wanted to make the scales look a little, you know, a little symmetrical, and that they were flowing easily down his back. So we're going to keep drawing the scales and taking those ovals and drawing another oval down there. Yeah, I might need to erase. Sometimes I'm not happy with what I draw. And then I have to erase and start over. But you all get the idea. And, you know, I've done this a few times too. I did it for door decorations when I was a hall director. I've done the full body of blaze for a card for a colleague one time. And it's a really fun object to draw because it really does represent SUNY Cortland really well. So I'm going to draw the bottom jaw of Blaze, and there's a little bit of a curve from the bottom oval. So now he's going to look like that. And I'll draw on the teeth too. Now the picture that I used to reference to didn't show all of Blaze's teeth. So you can put in as many or as little teeth as you want. And, you know, later on, if you want to draw some smoke to come out of his mouth too, that's great. I know whenever there are home football games, if I'm not mistaken, Blaze blows out smoke whenever Cortland gets a touchdown. Let's hope next time we're hosting Cortica, we can see a lot of that, right? All right, erasing more lines here. And one of the scales, this is the top scale from the statue. And it's a sheet of metal that's protruding out. So once we get to the coloring phase, I'll show you that you can make it look realistic by how you shade. But here we go. So that looks kind of like a upside down raindrop, if you think about it, what the scales look like. And then we're going to draw the front part of this body, the front scales. I think that's what they're called. And we didn't change much with the shape except make the edges a little bit more sharper. And they're cascading down his chest. And the bottom scale of the neck right here, again, like a raindrop. Or looks like the top of an ice cream cone, maybe. And then the last scale. And again, take your time with this too. You know, I'm going a little fast just because, you know, for the sake of time and not making this tutorial too long, but feel free to really, you know, I took my time with this and took a couple bit of tries before I could really get it the way that I wanted it to look. But you might be happy with yours, and that's great. And, you know, and if Blaze takes on a more of a cartoon form, that's even better too. So this is what it'll look like. Some of erasing all the shapes that you originally did. So now he looks like that. You know, all the scales doesn't have to look symmetrical either. The next phase then would be drawing the lines. So this is the next phase right here. So we're starting to add some depth and some detail to the head. Specifically on the statue there, where Scott welded the plates of metal together, it looks like a line. So, but you know, in dragon, if you think about a dragon, they have scales and there's definitions to them with lines. So that's what we're going to do now to make more of the statue. So one of the lines is going to be kind of at the halfway point of the side of his jaw. So like right at the top of the jawbone. And then one that's going to connect down over here by the lower part of the jaw. And then along the edge right here. Because if you've ever seen the statue or seen a picture of it, you'll know that it has some raised line marks like that. So we're going to try to draw that like this. Add some detail to the nose. And then the eye, and he has a little bit of an eyebrow right there. There we go. And draw the inside. It's kind of like his eyelid. It's kind of like how we have eyelids. It's like an extra layer within the eye, and this is the eyebrow. And then we're going to do some more lines at the top of the head, right near the horns. All right, and then the ear, lines along the ear. So once we get to the coloring phase, again, this is where we'll be able to show some depth. And there's also some lines technically in the bottom part of the scales. But where you'll see more is along the neck. So again, we're adding more detail. And you don't have to do this either. You can, keep, the lines out of it, or if you want to add them with shading, that's perfectly fine too. So we're going to draw the line down there and the scales. Now, I'm not too happy with how this scale came out. So I'm going to erase it a little bit. And if you need to go back to one stage, that's fine too. And if you're finding, sometimes also in terms of proportions, what I find to be really helpful is standing up. So kind of taking a new vantage point from where I'm drawing and seeing, do I want to add more length to the neck, or do I want to add more length to the face? That's something else that I've done, because sometimes I get really close in my sketchbook, or if I'm sitting down, sometimes I'm on my couch, and I realize that some parts of the body or the head or whatever I'm drawing is bigger than others. So that's another tip that I have. I'm trying to throw in some tips here too, as we're going along, of things that I've found helpful as I've grown in my drawing. I didn't always start off the way that I did, or the way that I have been drawing. And for those of you who've known me, I've been able to share my work, but it wasn't always the case. Lots of time and practice. All right, so we're, I wanted to add some lines too, because the way that Blaze is positioned, we'll be able to do a 3D element to the chest. So we're gonna add a line, because technically this scale right here, the gray scale on his chest wraps around him. So we're gonna show that by drawing these lines down here. All right, I think we're good. So that's that stage of what that looks like. So adding a lot of detail and slowly and gradually turning those shapes into more of Blaze. So the next stage is coloring, which is always a fun part. For a while, I've always drawn in black and white, but now I have explored more with colored pencil, and have really seen a difference, and been able to add some vibrancy to the work that I've done. So colored pencil. So I did, I started off with just red because of the red dragons, and I think I had a gray. I didn't have a gray, but I also just to add some boldness to the drawing, I sometimes outline my drawings in black ink pens. They can be pens like this, so like a fine tip, or thick tip if you want to do a thicker outline. And I just add it, and it usually goes well really over the graphite pencil. But Drew Blaze all in red, except for, oh, I forgot a part. And again, with the amount of pressure you usually give on the pencil determines how deep the color is. So, and also you want to make sure that you're coloring on a really good surface too, a hard surface, and also being conscious of the surface you're coloring on or drawing on, because it might take on that texture. So if you're on a coffee table that has graining, like a grainy texture, which could look kind of cool in the drawing, especially, you know, a drawing like Blaze where the material isn't always, you know, the coloring is, you know, different, even though it's the same color. I don't know if that made sense, but anyway, so I colored over even the lines here. I just left these, so the scales blank, or not blank, white, because we're gonna color those gray eventually. But what I am going to do is, I do have a black colored pencil. Great. So I'll just show you what I'm going to do. So we're going to color in the scale. And this is the part I want to tell you with shading. So with the shading, I like to start on the edges. And it really depends on the drawing. And something that I've learned when I was in art classes in high school is the way that the light hits an object. So you don't want it to be all black or, you know, all shaded. You want it to show different levels of shading and light, because then it would also take on a 3D element. So I like to start off in color and shade, and you know, shading is really gradual. So if you think about it, and I'll show you right here, you start off dark, and then taking some weight off, taking some pressure off rather of the page, so that way it gets lighter and lighter. So you press down hard and then slowly lift. So then you see, you know, a gradient scale like that. So similar to what I do, so what we did here, and you can even, you know, feel free to practice a little bit. I like to practice every now and then. This is a technical skill that you might have done when you took art classes in school, just to learn some basic shading. Because it's the same principle once you get to the actual piece that you're drawing. So on the picture that I referred to when drawing Blaze, the curvature of the scales showed a lot of depth, especially like, you know, inward curving in the ear. So I wanted to replicate that so we're getting a little dark on the corner, and then slowly lifting as we get higher in the ear. So we're at the top of the head. So usually the sun will hit Blaze from different angles depending on the day, depending on the time of the day. But most of it is, since these lines are kind of lifted, the fused, the welding lines are lifted, I usually draw darker around those edges. And then even darken these edges a little bit to show, kind of give that burnt look. And again, too, this is a way that you can show how the scale is lifted, because on the statue, these scales on the side of his neck are not on his neck. They're slightly lifted on the edge. So drawing a little shadow over here on the underneath part of that scale. And then there's also some shading too, because these are technically 3 panels on the scale right here. So those are the scales. For the chest, I'm hopping around to different parts of the blaze, I know. I want to make sure I cover all of them, because shading can take a while. Something that, you know, sometimes I like to do it a couple times before I get it right. Sometimes I'll go back to it if I really want it to look 3D. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but to show more of that 3D element, coloring rather, on the edge here. Coloring along the edges and then lightening up in the center. So I realized my hand was in the way. I'm sorry. First time doing a tutorial, but you know, if people enjoy this, I might do more, and I'd be glad to do more. Sharing the things that I've learned through drawing. And one of the things I like about drawing is that it tells a story, and what you draw, and necessarily also how you draw too, tells a story about what you see and what you want others to see. Because we all have stories that we want to share, and sometimes creative expression is the best way to share them, right? As opposed to just talking about it. And talking about it's good too. All right, so with the shading, you're just going to continue to darken along those lines here and then lightening up, similar to what we did in the ear here. Horns the same way. So starting off light, and that's what I would recommend too with shading, to especially with something as, you know, permanent and that you really can't erase, like colored pencil, is starting out light, because you can always go darker. That's a lesson I had to learn the hard way, because I used to draw really, really dark, and then it was difficult for me to go lighter, and I couldn't erase colored pencil. So I made a lot of errors, but that's okay. So again, trying to show some contrast in light and dark. And then here, I'll do the whole, I told you the eye is one of my favorites to draw, just because it shows, even if it's you're drawing an inanimate object like a statue, you can really show a lot of expression in the eye. So here we go. And drawing some depth here on the inside, because this part is indented, so it's not necessarily you know, like a typical eye on a person or a living being that would pop out. There's more depth to blaze. There we go. So, and if you don't want to shade, that's perfectly fine too. If you'd rather leave blaze all red and not add any darker shades to him, that's perfectly fine. Again, it's all of how you want to make it. All right. So again, that technique I shared earlier of going lighter, and sometimes I like to draw, I like to give a kind of a black shade over the entire drawing, so not leaving really any plain red. just to add some tintedness, make it have that metal look. I don't know. That's just something I like to do. All right, so you're going to keep shading that. Now I'm going to move on to what the final product did, or is from what I did, is, and I really kind of went really dark here. So maybe next time I want to go lighter. It's really up to you. So there's the final product. And now we'll come back here. So thank you very much for watching this. I hope you enjoy. Feel free to share it with anybody as a way of showing some Red Dragon pride during this time of physical distancing, but we're cultivating social solidarity, right? I hope you all stay safe and well, and most importantly, go Red Dragons.